in your home state of Missouri, and I'm grateful for a chance to spend some time with you on the floor here today discussing that good bill and your good ideas.
Let me talk just a little bit about the Startup Act that you and I have worked on, Senator Coons, and you mentioned, I think, all the co-sponsors of that, Senator Rubio, Senator Stabenow, Senator Moran, Senator Kaine, Senator Schumer, and Enzi, and what that does is try to extend the opportunity of research and development to startup businesses. You know, the way that tax credit works, if you can deduct those costs from the taxes you pay, but if you're a startup business, you often don't have any profit to deduct from. That's part of the courage, frankly, of starting a business. You're almost ensured, guaranteed that for the first weeks, months, sometimes the first years, depending on how big a venture this really is, you're not making money yet. And so what you and I and our friends have done in the Startup Act is say, but these people would have employees, and so what we do is allow the same tax credit for a big corporation or a big business or a highly successful business with lots of profit. We allow that same tax credit to be applied against what they pay as taxes on for their employees, the Social Security tax, the other taxes that are paid, and again, trying to encourage innovation. We all know that small business is the engine that drives the country, but it also can be the small business that drives it can be the engine that drives manufacturing if we figure out a way to let them have some of the same benefits that existing businesses have that have already gotten themselves in a profit-making situation. This just gives them a place to go and utilize that credit, and that's the kind of thing we ought to be looking at. Startup businesses are important, encouraging traditional businesses to figure out how to upgrade their equipment, to upgrade the way they do things so they're more competitive in an international marketplace. And I really do firmly believe that for reasons you mentioned, the wage gap is not what it was. The transportation costs are more than they were to get something made from somewhere else back to the greatest market in the world, the United States of America. And the more we know about the utility bill, Senator Donnelly from Indiana, who's here in the chair today, and I've been working on things that pay attention to the utility bill. Again, that's a key component of future manufacturing. The more competitive you are, the more innovative you are, the more you're likely to be concerned about that part of your input cost. And sometimes when you expand, the utility bill is a bigger thing to look at than the additional labor cost. But that may be exactly what ensures that you can keep the labor you have and grow that labor by being able to make a commitment that you feel good about because you feel good about your ability to run that facility once you build it. You feel good that not only is it going to work this year, but by the way, we're doing so well and doing so many things that 10 years from now, we feel like that whatever the utility costs are going to be, they're going to be within the range that we could deal with and still make things right in Missouri, right in Ohio, right in Delaware or Indiana, and that's the kind of thing we ought to be focusing on. How do we make things again? How do we create other kinds of private sector jobs, the #1 domestic priority of the country today? And every time you and I talk about manufacturing, I really do get excited about an America that is thinking about not are we going to be able to continue to make what we've always made, but what can we make better than anybody else that we're not making yet that's going to allow us to be out there in a world marketplace. Trade has become a much greater opportunity for the American workforce as all of these other factors that we've been talking about on the floor have come together to make our workforce what it is. And if you have any final remarks, Senator Coons, I'd like you to finish up our time here on the floor.
Well, thank you, Senator Blunt, and thank you for your enthusiasm for manufacturing and for your enthusiasm for working together with me on the Startup Innovation Credit Bill, as you referenced, and with Senator Brown on the National Network of Manufacturing Innovation Centers, as you spoke about. Manufacturing really is the center, the beating heart of the middle class of America. Manufacturing jobs are good jobs. We do need to get back to being a country where inventing things, growing things, making things in this country is an area of bipartisan, sustained, purposeful focus. I know for the folks who watch us at home and for the folks here in this chamber, nothing could meet the demands and the needs of our communities and our states more than for us to come together in a bipartisan, balanced and responsible way to advocate for a stronger manufacturing sector here in the United States. So, Senator Blunt, thank you very much. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
President.
The Senator from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we've all now been aware over the last few days in the news about the problems being faced with the website upon which people are supposed to go to in order to sign up to be on one of these exchanges. And that's important because next year Americans are going to owe money to the IRS if they don't have health insurance by a date certain. One of the ways people are supposed to get health insurance is by going on one of these websites and logging on and registering and being able to see what their options are for insurance and then signing up. And if you don't do that, then you're going to owe money to the IRS next year. The problem is that those websites aren't working. In fact, just today, as the Secretary was testifying before a House committee, the website crashed again. Now, there are a lot of different reasons why that's happening, and I'm sure eventually, with all the experts that are involved in it, eventually they'll be able to set up a website that functions, because this is the 21st century. The ability to go online and buy something is, frankly, is something people do every single day with all kinds of things. And so, to me, it's inexplicable that they're not able to do that when it comes to health insurance. But in the meantime, people are struggling not just with the website, by the way, the problems now with the 800 number and the paper applications. So I believe the prudent approach is to say that we are going to delay, that we are going to put off punishing people, that we're going to put off this individual mandate until the website works. Now, I will admit, I don't think the law works at all in its totality, and it will eventually have to be repealed. That's what I favor. But in the interim, what I'm proposing is something that I think is pretty reasonable, and that is the notion that until these websites are working, how can we punish people for not buying health insurance? How are we going to punish someone for not buying health insurance if the website they're supposed to buy it on, by the administration's own admission, is not properly working? And this is creating a lot of anxiety for people. So that's why I filed a bill to do that, and that's why I come on the floor today and for the purposes of making a motion, Mr. President, and as of in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 225, Senate Bill 1592, which is a bill to delay the individual mandate until the health exchanges are functioning properly. And I further ask, as part of this request, consent that the bill be read a third time and passed, that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Mr. President.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Montana.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, I think it's pretty clear that this motion is inappropriate. This is not what we should be doing or how we should potentially change the Act. And actually, the effect here is to disrupt implementation of the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act is a law. It's been in place for several years. The Supreme Court's upheld it. Attempts to repeal it failed. I think the House voted up to 20 times to try to repeal the ACA. They've all failed. The Act's here. So the goal here is to make it work. Make the Act work, and then later on then ask questions about what happened, why did it not work, why was implementation, that is, of the exchanges as good as a lot of us would like to have been, and find out who was responsible, et cetera. Right now, it works. The effect of this motion is several-fold. One, it will deny people from having health insurance. People that otherwise would get health insurance. If you delay this the individual responsibility requirement, it's going to cause a delay. People will not have insurance. Second, it's going to increase the costs of health insurance for a lot of people. Why? Because fewer people will be signed up. The individual responsibility requirement will not be followed as much as otherwise would be the case. The result is that fewer people will be insurance pool, and therefore prices will be higher. Another consequence is it lowers the quality of health insurance, especially for those individuals who are seeking to be insured. They're going to have a lower quality product as a consequence of this request. It destabilizes. It's an attempt to destabilize. It's an attempt to undermine the ACA. I think for those reasons it's inappropriate, and that, again, as another effort to obstruct, we should not proceed in this way. So I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President?
Senator from Florida.
Mr. President, I don't intend to offer another motion since the objection's been heard. I do want to point out a couple of things. First of all, this notion that Obamacare is the law. It's true, it is the law. It was passed by Congress in the years before I got here. I want to point, this is called the calendar of business. This is the executive calendar. Basically, every single bill that's in here is an effort to change existing law, for the most part. That's what we do around here. That's what the legislative process is about. Virtually every bill that is filed is either an effort to create a new law, but usually it's an effort to change existing law. So if we begin to argue around here that once something is existing law, it can never be changed, well, we might as well close up shop, because that's what we do. That's what the legislative process is about. The second point that was made was that this law will prevent people from having health insurance. That is not true. Now, let me say this. Number one, I am in favor of people having health insurance, and I do think that we cannot ignore the health insurance problem that this country faces. Number two, admittedly, I am in favor of repealing Obamacare and replacing it with a better alternative. But that's not what this bill does. All this bill says, this is the only thing it says. The only thing it says is that you cannot enforce the individual mandate, that you cannot tell people next year that we will fine you, that the IRS is going to impose a fine on you. You will not be able to do that until the website is fully working. In terms of this preventing people from getting health insurance, that's simply not accurate. This doesn't prevent anyone from going onto the website and signing up. If the bill that I am proposing is adopted, it wouldn't keep anybody from signing up for health insurance under Obamacare. The only thing it would keep is the IRS from fining you if you're unable to do it. And the reason why that makes sense is because the way we're supposed to do it on a website simply isn't working. So it's just not accurate to say that this will somehow prevent people from buying health insurance. It doesn't. It doesn't prohibit you from trying to get it on the website. It's just a recognition that the website's not working well, and there's a consequence to it. The consequence to it is that if they can't get these websites up and running, there are people that will not be able to buy health insurance, and they're going to get fined for it. That doesn't sound fair to me. So while I continue to want to repeal Obamacare, I think for the good of our people, it's unfair to continue to hold over the head the threat of an IRS fine when the method of compliance that we're asking them to follow isn't fully functioning. And that's all that this would do. And I would point out that this is not a theoretical concern. I get letters and emails every day, but I want to read one that I got, and I'll paraphrase it. It's from Barbara in Ruskin, Florida. She's 63-year-old. She tried to apply to the health insurance marketplace on October 1st. As of the writing of this email, she's no further along. She sought the services of a certified navigator on the 14th of October. After spending hours online trying to get an account established and making the application, the navigator, with her on speakerphone, after many hours, finally assisted her in making an application. She was told that she would receive additional information via email. 10 days later, she had still heard nothing. She's worried because she's currently covered, but that is being terminated at the end of the year because of Obamacare. It's going to end on the 31st, and according to the information provided to her, she has to be enrolled in another insurance plan or she's going to face the fine. This is just one example. I could go on and on. I don't want to burden the time of the Senate, but there are thousands upon thousands of people that are dealing with this problem. Here's the last point I would make. I have now heard on a number of occasions the administration say that with full confidence that by the end of this coming month, that by the end of November, the websites will be up and running. If that is true, If that's true, then there's no reason to be against my bill. If in fact you are so confident that the websites are going to be up and running by the end of November, then this problem will be taken care of. If in fact you are right and the websites are going to be up and running at the end of November, then the mandate will be back in effect. The only thing my bill does is says, as long as the website is not working and until it is working, you cannot enforce the Obamacare mandates on people through a fine from the IRS. That's it. That's all it says. And that's why I think this makes all the sense in the world, and I am surprised that we somehow believe that we should continue to hold the penalty over people's heads when the way that we're asking them to comply with the law, by the admission of the administration, by the admission of the Secretary today, is simply not working well enough. So I hope that in the days to come my colleagues will reconsider, because I think our people, irrespective of how you feel about Obamacare, I think our people deserve better. To that end, I would read to you one email I got from someone who actually supports Obamacare. Nicholas in Palm Bay, Florida, wrote an extensive email. He talked about how he submitted an application through the website. It took hours to complete because of web issues. They finally finished the application 23 days later. The application is still in progress, but it won't let him go any further to choose the insurance. And so while he does not agree with me about defunding Obamacare or repealing Obamacare, he agrees with me that we should suspend the individual mandate penalty until this website thing is fixed. So I think there are a lot of people that are going to feel that way. And I think there are a lot of people that would be shocked that the government is going to punish them for not buying insurance when the website that they're being sent to buy it on doesn't work. And again, I think that is a common sense approach. I'm surprised that there's objection to it. I suppose I shouldn't be, but I am. And I hope that in the days and weeks to come that my colleagues will reconsider, because in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of many Americans, it's simply unfair. With that, Mr. President, I would suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
The senator from Delaware.
Is the Senate in a quorum call?
It is.
I ask unanimous consent that proceedings under the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise today to speak in favor of Ms. Patricia Millet's nomination to the D.C. Circuit Court. As a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I have the opportunity to closely examine each of the judicial candidates nominated by our President. I did so with Ms. Millett, attending her nomination hearing and speaking to a wide range of the practitioners and colleagues who have direct knowledge of her professionalism and experience. Without exception, at every stage of her career and with every personal and professional colleague with whom she's had work experience, Patty, Ms. Millett, has distinguished herself as a person of integrity, intelligence, and dedication. She is a person whose capability and devotion to a family is an inspiration to those around her. She is unanimously recommended by former living solicitors general and received the ABA's highest rating. Some of my colleagues here have argued that President Obama is trying to, quote, pack the court by nominating Ms. Millett and two other nominees to fill 3 current vacancies on the D.C. Circuit Court. These charges of court packing strike me, frankly, as without foundation. Court packing is an historical term used to describe when politicians try to change the size of a court, expand a court, in order to control its expected outcomes. That was the cause of the objection to President Roosevelt's plan to add up to 6 justices to the U.S. Supreme Court back in 1937. This is, in fact, the opposite. In fact, a current legislative proposal to strip the President's ability to fill 3 vacant seats on the D.C. Circuit could better be called court stripping. In this particular case, Making nominations to vacant judicial positions is not court packing. It is a president doing his job and confirming highly qualified nominees to serve on this circuit in this vacancy would be this body doing its job. Charges of court packing, I think, are absurd on their face. They're even more absurd when put in context. Ms. Millett has been nominated to the 9th seat of the 11 authorized on this court. There are currently 3 vacancies on this vital circuit court. I held a hearing earlier this year on judicial staffing levels in my role as the chair of the subcommittee on bankruptcy in the courts of the Judiciary Committee. And I invited the chair of the Judicial Conference's Committee on Judicial Resources, Judge Timkovich, to come and testify. For those who ascribe significance to such things, Judge Timkovich was nominated by President George W. Bush to serve on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. George Timkovich testified, convincingly in my opinion, that the federal judiciary needs more judges, not fewer. Every other year, the Judicial Conference submits to Congress a report on recommendations on judgeships. That report did not conclude that any judgeship should be removed or remain unfilled on the D.C. Circuit. Judge Timkovich also explained why the caseload statistics used by some of our colleagues to argue that the D.C. Circuit has a low caseload and thus need not have its vacancies filled are in fact unconvincing. The D.C. Circuit, in fact, hears a unique caseload with 4 times the number of complex administrative appeals than other circuit courts around the country. You see, the D.C. Circuit is the circuit court from which all the federal agencies' actions are appealed. So more than any other court in the country, its caseload is made up of very complex, very difficult cases with far-reaching consequences and that require a great deal of time. So simply looking at the raw number of cases filed, opened, and closed is not an accurate predictor of whether or not a vacant seat on the D.C. Circuit should in fact be filled. The D.C. Circuit's caseload has in fact remained steady over the past 10 years, so the Judicial Conference has seen no reason to recommend any alteration in its staffing levels. The court-packing argument made by some is also at odds with history, especially when you consider that caseloads lower than they are now on the D.C. Circuit were sufficient when all Republicans then in office voted to confirm then-Judge Roberts to the 9th seat, Janice Rogers Brown to the 10th seat, Thomas Griffin to the 11th seat, and Brett Kavanaugh to the 10th seat when it became vacant. When Ms. Millett is confirmed, the D.C. Circuit will still have more pending appeals per active judge than after the confirmations of any of those 4 earlier Bush nominees I just referenced. The caseload on the D.C. Circuit would also remain above that of the current 6th Circuit and 10th Circuit, to which courts the Senate has confirmed Republican-supported judicial nominees this year. A filibuster of Ms. Millett on caseload grounds would bring the Senate to an unprecedented and regrettable place. It would destroy comity and trust at a time when our nation needs it most, when we need to demonstrate to the people of the United States that this Congress can function and that the Senate can fulfill its constitutional role. It would not just facilitate the administration of justice by our courts, but also allow us to tackle other issues. If we could move past endless and needless filibusters on issues like this, it would allow us to move forward to the broader issues of the day, tackling long-term debt and deficit challenges, the fight against global terrorism, reinvesting in our future, working together to advance manufacturing and grow our economy. There are so many other issues that call for the time of this body. With that, Mr. President, I want to urge my colleagues to look at Ms. Millett's nomination on its merits and to not be distracted by what I think are groundless arguments that this is an instance of so-called court packing by this president. This president is doing his job. He is nominating supremely qualified candidates to serve in the highest courts of this land, and this body should do its job and confirm those qualified nominees. Thank you. Mr. President, if I might, I wanted to simply comment to this body that something passed with little notice here yesterday. October 29th of 2013 was National Technological Innovation Day. This was recognizing the role that technological innovation plays in the United States economy. We know that innovation is absolutely essential to developing new medicines and treatments and cures to help us live longer and more healthy lives. Innovation is essential to strengthen the manufacturing sector of the American economy and make us more competitive. Innovation is essential to allow us to take advantage of new materials and new opportunities in the world and to access new export markets overseas. Innovation overall is the thing that has brought all of what is best about modern life and the modern world. So yesterday, in a bipartisan way, we recognized the fact that on October 29th, many years ago, was the very first day that DARPANet was able to exchange communications from one computer to another. It was literally the dawning of the modern Internet age. This was made possible in part by federal investment in innovation. And I was grateful that Senators Moran and Isaacson and Senator Heinrich and Kirk joined me in recognizing the unique and important role that technological innovation has played in America's past, America's present, and America's future. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
The pending business on the floor of the Senate is the nomination of Katherine Archuleta to be the Director of Office of Personnel Management, the Senate in a quorum call. Also on Capitol Hill today, a number of hearings underway, 2 conferences. The budget conference met earlier today, and we'll show that to you later in our primetime here on C-SPAN 2. Meanwhile, on C-SPAN 3 at this hour, the Farm Bill Conference just getting underway. You can follow that live on C-SPAN 3. And earlier today, we brought you the hearing of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. They heard from Secretary Kathleen Sebelius of the Health and Human Services Department on the launch of Obamacare and the healthcare.gov website. She talked about a number of the issues that have been raised since the debut of that website October 1st. We're going to show you some of the testimony from earlier today as this quorum call continues.
Thank you, Chairman Upton, Ranking Member Waxman, members of the committee. I left my position as governor of Kansas 4.5 years ago for the opportunity to continue work I've been doing for most of my over 35 years of public service, to expand the opportunities for all Americans, regardless of geography or gender or income, to have affordable health coverage. During my years as a state legislator, as an elected insurance commissioner, as head of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, and as a 2-term governor, and now as HHS secretary, I have worked on that effort that I care deeply about. There are still millions of Americans who are uninsured as well as underinsured, people who have some coverage at some price for some illness, but have no real protection from financial ruin and no real confidence they'll be able to take care of themselves and their families if they have an accident or an illness. And for them, a new day has finally come. In these early weeks, access to healthcare.gov has been a miserably frustrating experience for way too many Americans, including many who have waited years, in some cases their entire lives, for the security of health insurance. I am as frustrated and angry as anyone with the flawed launch of healthcare.gov. So let me say directly to these Americans, you deserve better. I apologize. I'm accountable to you for fixing these problems, and I'm committed to earning your confidence back by fixing the site. We're working day and night, and we'll continue until it's fixed. We've recently added new management talent, additional technical expertise, and a new general contractor to identify, prioritize, and manage fixes across the system in two broad categories: performance, which deals with speed and reliability, and function, which deals with bugs and problems in the system. Our extensive assessment has determined that healthcare.gov is fixable, and I want to just outline a couple of the improvements we've made to date. We now have more
timely and I think very well needed. One of the reasons I decided to run for the United States Senate was the passage of the health care law. The reason I thought it was pretty important, because I said at the time that the passage of the health care law represented the greatest assault on our freedoms in my lifetime. I believe that's true, and I believe that's being borne out today. We are witnessing it today. The passage of the health care law resonated with me, made such an impact on myself, because my wife and I are beneficiaries of the freedom that we had with our current health care system. Our first child, our daughter Carrie, was born with a very serious congenital heart defect, where aorta and pulmonary artery were reversed. So the first day of life, our daughter Carrie was rushed down to Milwaukee Children's Hospital, where a wonderful man, Dr. John Thomas, came in at 1:30 in the morning, did a procedure, and saved her life. 8 months later, when her heart was the size of a small plum, another incredibly dedicated team of medical professionals, in 7 hours of open heart surgery, totally rebaffled the upper chamber of her heart. Her heart operates backwards today. But she's 30 years old. She's actually a nurse practitioner practicing at that same hospital in which her life was saved. She just got married about 3 weeks ago. Now, our story has a happy ending because my wife Jane and I had that freedom. I was able to call up Boston Children's and Chicago Children's Hospital, talk to the preeminent surgeons in the world, which means in America, and find out what is the most advanced medical treatment, the most advanced surgical technique at the time. And we were able to avail ourselves of that. Now I've got a beautiful daughter who's 30 years old, and she's also taking care of those little babies in a neonatal intensive care unit. I decided to pass this, or file this piece of legislation today because, as a United States Senator from the state of Wisconsin, we have been getting a number of phone calls into our office of Wisconsinites that are getting letters of cancellation of their insurance policies. In particular, one couple touched my heart, gave me a great deal of cause for concern. This couple, who does not want to be identified because they fear IRS retribution, which is a little bit different story, a little off topic, but I guess I think it's worth pointing out. This couple, they both have cancer. The wife has stage 4 lung cancer. The husband is recovering from prostate cancer. It's in remission. Now, this couple had availed themselves and are currently covered under the Wisconsin high-risk insurance pool. It's a high-risk pool that works. I know in my business, when we had an individual that was lasered off of our insurance policy, those individuals were able to avail themselves of this sharing of the risk pool in the high-risk pool. And it works. And it's affordable. This couple received their notice of cancellation from the high-risk pool, and they panicked. They were in a panic. Now, when you have stage 4 lung cancer, the last thing you need is stress. Obamacare caused them a great deal of stress. It's causing them a great deal of stress. They tried to get on healthcare.gov almost 40 times without success. They contacted our office. We've done everything we can to help them. They've been in touch with some of the insurance carriers that will be part of the exchange participating in Wisconsin. They've gotten quotes. Now, this is preliminary. This isn't final. But under the high-risk pool, their maximum out-of-pocket exposure, including the cost of their premiums, is about $20,000 per year. He's working. He's got a good job. They could barely afford that. preliminary indications show that that exposure will double to $40,000. And the only reason they may remain whole is that they may qualify for a subsidy. Nobody can calculate it yet. They've gotten 3 different answers. It's kind of like you take a tax return to 100 different preparers and you get 100 different results of what your tax is owed. But based on those preliminary estimates, it's looking like their total exposure won't be $20,000. It'll be more like $40,000, and their subsidy might cover half of that. So their health care expense didn't decline, as President Obama promised, by $2,500 per year. It's going to virtually double. And if it doesn't double, it's because the American taxpayer will be picking up that other half. So one of President Obama's primary promises he made, that if you pass a health care law, the cost of a family plan will decline by $2,500 per year by the end of his first term, that promise has been broken. That was not true. And of course, the other very famous promise the President made repeatedly was, if you like your health care plan, you can keep your health care plan. And I'd like to just go through a number of times President Obama actually made that statement. Looked the American people in the eye, trying to sell his health care plan, and guaranteed them if they liked their health care plan, they're going to be able to keep it. On March 6, 2009, he said, this is an exact quote, "If somebody has insurance they like, they should be able to keep that insurance. If they have a doctor they like, they should be able to keep that doctor." Then on May 11, 2009, Americans must have the freedom to keep whatever doctor and health care plan they have. On June 2, 2009, if they like the coverage they have now, they can keep it. That was in a letter to Senate Democrat leaders. On June 11, 2009, President Obama said Americans must have the freedom to keep whatever doctor and health care plan they have. On June 15, 2009, this is probably the most famous one that I remember, President Obama, in an address to the American Medical Association, said, if you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor, period. If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan, period. No one will take it away, no matter what. Now, Mr. President, I think I've made my point. I've got another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 other quotes that I could continue to read, basically make the same point, the same promise, the same guarantee. As recently as the beginning of this month, on the White House website, it says, we've got some good news for you. If you currently have private health insurance, you should be able to keep it. And that's exactly what the health care law says. Now, unfortunately, today over 2 million Americans have received cancellation of their insurance policies, the policies they chose, that for just a little time, a little more time, they have the freedom to choose. They won't have that freedom come January 1st. So either one of 2 possibilities are true. Either President Obama was being entirely dishonest to the American public when he made those repeated promises, those repeated guarantees, or he was totally disengaged from the process, did not have a clue what was in his own health care plan, or did not understand the incredibly negative consequences of that health care plan. Which brings me to my bill. The reason that President Obama claims if you like your health care plan, you can keep it, is that within the health care bill, there actually is a grandfather clause. Now, the first 2 paragraphs of that grandfather clause actually would work. The problem is those first 2 paragraphs or sections are followed by an evisceration of the grandfather clause. So basically what you have is you have a phony grandfather clause contained within the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. Well, my piece of legislation, the If You Like Your Health Plan, You Can Keep It Act, actually is a real grandfather clause, and it uses President Obama's exact language. So all my bill does is just simply strikes the phony grandfather clause, and it inserts basically the exact same language that was there, although we remove those exceptions, those mandates. In other words, we eviscerate the evisceration of the grandfather clause. So I'm here today to announce that I filed that bill. We have at least 35 Republican co-sponsors of the bill. I know the House is moving a similar piece of legislation. I know there's talk, hopefully, that we will be joined by our Democrat colleagues. It's just a really very simple proposition. I'm asking every senator to join me in passing this bill, the true grandfather clause, to help President Obama keep his promise to the American people. Now, I have to say, unfortunately, that Wisconsin couple that I would so like to help, so like to guarantee that they could keep their health care coverage, this bill won't help them. The only way we can help that couple is if we repeal the entire law because of guaranteed issue, high-risk pools are extinct. They don't exist. That coverage is gone. But if my Democrat Senate colleagues would join me in passing this bill, the If You Like Your Health Plan, You Can Keep It Act, we can keep President Obama's promise for millions of Americans. I think it's worth it. And I ask all of my Senate colleagues to join me in this effort. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. And note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, I would ask that the clerk dispense with the calling of the roll.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today to support my colleague and my friend, Congressman Mel Watt of North Carolina, who has been nominated by the President to be the next Director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, the FHFA. And I have total confidence that Mel is fully capable and qualified to serve as FHFA Director, and I am not alone. This week, the National Association of Home Builders wrote a letter to Leader Reid and Leader McConnell unequivocally endorsing Congressman Watt, stating, and I quote, "During Representative Watt's tenure on the House Financial Services Committee, he has proven to be a thoughtful leader on housing policy. The FHFA needs a permanent director with his leadership capabilities." Senator Burr, Congressman Watt's Republican colleague from North Carolina, and Senator Hagan recently shared a dear colleague in which both North Carolina senators stated clearly that, in their words, Congressman Watt has shown himself to be an honest, kind, and capable individual with deep understanding of the housing market. We urge you to support his nomination. He is indeed qualified to serve as the FHFA Director. He is an incredibly decent and honest person who I know will always work diligently towards a decision based on the facts, not on ideology or momentary trends. Democrats know this, and Republicans who have worked and served with him know this. And despite this, some question whether Congressman Watt has the technical experience to run FHFA. So let's look at Congressman Watt's record to see if we can peel that back and look closely. He is a graduate of Yale Law School who for 22 years practiced business, economic development, and real estate law. He is not a theoretician. He has actually been into courts dealing with issues with respect to housing. He understands the impact of foreclosure, not just the macroeconomics, but the personal dimension. He understands the role of financial intermediaries, banks, and housing agencies. And he's been a 21-year member of the House Financial Services Committee. So legislatively, he has been engaged and involved in every major business, financial, and housing initiative in the last 2 decades. And he's seen it from his perspective as a legislator. And he's earned the support of his colleagues, but also he's earned the support of his constituents and his neighbors back home. He's got the, in endorsement of the former Republican chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, Spencer Bachus of Alabama, who noted, Congressman Watt has played an integral role in the Financial Services Committee's deliberations on housing policy and is known as a serious and substantive legislator. In my experience in working with him on a variety of issues, I have always personally respected Congressman Watt for his intellect, attention to detail, and dedication to serving the public. Again, a reflection of 2 decades of service at the heart of the process of legislating with respect to housing policy in the United States. So, Mr. President, when you combine his legal training, his practical experience as a lawyer, his 2 decades of service as a member of the Financial Services Committee, he is fully qualified for this key position. And it is vitally important now because we have to seriously tackle the issue of housing finance reform. And we have to take into consideration the needs and concerns of all the stakeholders, from investors to homeowners. And again, Congressman Watt has that perspective, knowing the intricacies from his legal training of financial laws, knowing the reality of being in a court, negotiating on behalf of clients, doing what he has to do to protect the interests of his clients, and as a legislature, looking at over 2 decades what we have done to create housing policy in the United States. The FHFA should be led by a confirmed director, confirmed by the United States Senate, not an acting director, because I think we have to send the signal that this is a position that is important and deserves a confirmed director, notwithstanding the skills and abilities and the great dedication of the current director. But we have to, I think, put in there someone who is confirmed by the Senate. There's too much at stake, too many critical decisions each day, and too much at stake in terms of housing reform not to have a confirmed director in FHFA. And so I urge my colleagues to allow his nomination to come before this body for a vote. Congressman Watt deserves no less. And I indeed urge support for his confirmation. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor. No. Oh, and yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Nebraska.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today I rise to call attention to a problem that seems to have gotten lost in the shuffle recently. That issue, Mr. President, is our unemployed and underemployed American youth. On September 14th, the Wall Street Journal published a must-read story entitled "Wanted, Jobs for the New Lost Generation." And I'd like to read a brief excerpt from there. Like so many young Americans, Derek Weatherall is stuck. At 23 years old, he has a job but not a career, and little prospect for advancement. He has tens of thousands of dollars in student debt, but no college degree. He says he's more likely to move back in with his parents than to buy a home. And he doesn't know what he will do if his car, which is a 2001 Chrysler Sebring with well over 100,000 miles, what is he going to do if that breaks down? I'm kind of spinning my wheels, Mr. Weatherall says. We can wishfully think that eventually it's going to get better, but we really don't know. And that doesn't really help us now. Derek Weatherall's experience is hardly unique. It is, unfortunately, an experience shared by Americans across this nation, including in my home state of Nebraska. Despite promises of economic recovery, jobs remain scarce, particularly for young people. A quick survey of family members, neighbors, and friends reveals that too many adult children are now living at home, stuck in their parents' proverbial basement. A study released by the Opportunity Nation shows that 6 million young people between 16 and 24 are neither in school nor are they working. That means roughly 15% of America's youth are idle, when they should be gearing up for their most productive years. The study went on to state that youth unemployment is at its highest in more than a decade, and young people in many European countries now have a better shot at moving up the ladder from poor to rich than they do in America. The United States has always stood as the land of opportunity, the new home sought by immigrants from Europe and from around the world, risking life and limb for personal freedom and economic progress. It seems that the ancient European capitals now offer young people more hope, a better chance at upward mobility than our failing economy. That must change. The jobless youth don't belong exclusively to any class, race, or gender. This problem does not discriminate. Nearly 1 in 4 African American youth are unemployed, while the unemployment rate for young Latinos in September was 15.8%. Young men are employed at a rate of over 17%, while nearly 13% of young women are out of work. Washington Monthly recently discussed the long-term impact of joblessness on our youth. The consequences are dire for these young Americans, the publication noted. They're not only more likely to have a hard time in the job market, researchers have found that disconnection has scarring effects on health and happiness that endure throughout a lifetime. Unemployed, uneducated youth are at greater risk for criminality and incarceration, and they often go on to become unreliable spouses and improvident parents. The costs to society are also considerable. The direct support expenses and lost tax revenues associated with disengaged young people cost U.S. taxpayers $93 billion in 2011 alone, a bill that will only compound as the years progress, the publication concluded. In short, our weak economy is not only frustrating young Americans presently eager for work, it is jeopardizing their future. It's threatening more than just their ability to find present jobs. It's thwarting their efforts to build rewarding careers and start families. They're getting a late start, if any start at all. And what about those young Americans who have found work? Well, according to a report by Accenture, over 40% of college graduates in the last 2 years are overqualified for their jobs. In other words, many of them are underemployed. I believe that all work has dignity. And while a college degree is important, it is not for everyone. But hardworking young people should have the opportunity to use their degrees and pursue their passions. They're not asking for special treatment. They're just asking for a chance. This economy is holding them back. As if young people weren't facing enough adversity, now they're told that they're legally required to purchase costly health insurance. In fact, the new law completely depends upon their participation. Yet the report on premiums released by the Department of Health and Human Services shows that many young people will not qualify for subsidies to make their premiums affordable. A study published by the National Center for Public Policy Research found that subsidies did not exist for people from the 18 to 34 years of age in 11 of 15 exchanges. These young people will be required to pay the full price of their premiums, which we all know are skyrocketing around this country. The American Academy of Actuaries published an article noting that the young people who don't qualify for subsidies will see an increase in costs of 42%. Tom from Omaha wrote me to tell me about his 26-year-old son who had been paying $159 a month for his health coverage. Effective January 1st, 2014, Tom wrote, His rate will be $231. What is affordable about this? Tom added that his son's deductible would increase by $3,000 and his out-of-pocket costs by $3,850. We're no longer dealing with projections. We are dealing with real people. The National Center for Public Policy Research also found that even with the subsidies, about 3.7 million young people would actually save at least $500 by foregoing insurance and paying the fine. And as many as 3 million young people would save at least $1,000 by opting out of Obamacare. The bottom line, we have record numbers of unemployed young Americans now being forced to purchase health plans they do not want, and in some cases with coverage that they don't even need. We need to empower, not burden, young Americans. The American dream of launching a career and starting a family, of buying a home and forging a brighter future, is not some quaint relic of a bygone era. The dream is alive and well. Our young people are still dreaming. It's time for us to honor our duty to ensure that the next generation has the tools and experience to succeed, to keep America strong, and to pursue that dream. Right now, Mr. President, we are falling woefully short, but we can do better. Our children and our grandchildren are counting on us. This generation isn't lost yet, and I'm here to fight for them. Thank you, Mr. President. I would note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. Mr. President,
Senator from Nevada.
I ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to speak on why I had a hold on this particular nomination. And contrary to some that are speculating on this issue, I'm not voting against this specific nominee. My concerns are with the way OPM determines who can ask questions and who can receive answers. Imagine there's a federal government out there, an agency that determines who can ask a question to them and who can get an answer. And whether a member of the minority or the majority, every member should be able to ask questions and to receive those answers. And frankly, if you ask a question, you should be able to get an answer, and when you get the answer, it probably should be truthful. And that's my argument, and that's the purpose that I have this hold. I want to be very clear that I'm not voting against the nominee as an individual. I'm voting against the agency itself. And when OPM, in my opinion, has become one of the most politicized agencies in Washington, D.C. And I believe the Office of Personnel Management has refused to do its part to ensure that all Americans are treated fairly under Obamacare. And specifically what I mean by that is that I believe that what's good for the American people, and I know there's members, Mr. President, you probably agree with me that what's good for the American people should be good for Congress. What's good for Congress should be good for the American people. And I think that's a standard which many of us here in the Senate live by. I think there are some that don't, but I think the majority do. If something's good for the American people, it should be good for Congress. I think Obamacare is a good example of that. For me, the most concerning issue is whether OPM engaged in negotiations with the Senate and House leadership to secure exemptions and subsidies for members of the United States Senate and the House of Representatives. I want to thank a colleague of mine from Louisiana, Senator Vitter, for his hard-fought effort on this particular issue, trying to get questions. I'm not the only person here in this chamber that can't get questions answered out of OPM. I'd like to walk for a minute, Mr. President, the timeline and the difficulty that I've had with OPM over the last couple of months trying to get direct and truthful answers from this agency. I want to start on August 28th. I wrote the OPM asking that the agency, August 28th, asking specifically from the agency to ensure that all congressional staff, including leadership and committee staff, be fairly treated under Obamacare. And I'd like to quote, if I may, from this particular letter. This is, and I said, quote, "This is a missed opportunity for the Office of Personnel Management, which currently administers and operates congressional health care, to ensure that all congressional staff, including committee and leadership, play by the same rules as the American taxpayer." I go on to say later, as you issue your final rule in this order to comply with Section 1312 of the Affordable Care Act, I encourage you to clarify this issue once and for all and require in addition to members of Congress and their congressional staff, committee and leadership to go into the exchanges. I wanted the dialogue. I wanted this conversation. That's why I wrote to OPM. So, of course, I was looking to hear back from them. And, Mr. President, I received no answer. I received no answer from the agency, so I followed up on September 13th. So from August 28th to September 13th, I got no answer. So on September 13th, I wrote, "So I would like to first express my disappointment with your agency's lack of response to my stated concerns. In addition, I'd like to reiterate my request that the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, clearly mandate in its final rules that all congressional staff, including committee and leadership, be subject to the consequences of Obamacare." I think that's a fair dialogue, fair question to ask. So that was on September 13th. Finally, on September 18th, I got the response. Not the response that I wanted, as you can imagine, but I did get a response. And in their letter, it says, "In issuing our final rule, OPM will address this specific issue as well as others related by members of Congress and at the public at large." So, in this letter on September 18th, I wanted to have a discussion with OPM. And OPM says, "You can read the final rule. That's what you get. You can just read the final rule. We're not going to have a discussion with you. We're not going to reach out. We're not going to come to your office. We just want you to read the final rule, like every other American, and we're not going to have the discussion prior to issuing the rule." So, obviously, I wasn't going to take that for an answer, Mr. President. So I reached out, and I requested a formal briefing with the acting director. And sure enough, we had that meeting on September 26th. So this is from August 28th all the way to September 26th. And I will tell you, frankly, it was a good discussion. They were frank. They had a couple of members of their staff there. I raised my concerns about possible backdoor negotiations that would allow for special treatment under the law. And I asked specifically whether OPM had engaged in leadership on this issue. I asked that question. Have you engaged in leadership on this issue? I asked the question 3 times. Did you engage with leadership on either the House side or the Senate side in how you wrote these rules? 3 times I asked that question, and 3 times OPM had insisted that they had, that the answer was no. So they said no 3 times. They had formulated their proposals, rules based on the advice of their lawyers. So, you know what, I was okay with that. We had discussions on other principles of the bill itself, but that was the essence of the conversation we had, and I seemed fine with that. Frankly, I was ready to release my hold. But what I did want was answers in writing. I wanted to memorialize the conversation that we'd had in my office with you, so I sent them another letter on September 28th. Formally requested OPM to provide me with a detailed list of all conversations or negotiations that they had had with staff members of the Senate or House leadership when crafting the proposed rules. And I want to be very specific. On September 28th, we had numerous questions, but question number 4 that I had, provide me a detailed list of all conversations or negotiations you had with any staff member of Senate or House leadership when crafting your proposed rules, specifically the provisions given each member of Congress the authority to determine who on their staff goes into the exchange. If you engaged in any discussion, both formal or informal, with leadership staff, was there any undue pressure received from any staff during these discussions, and do you believe that this was a conflict of interest? So that question, that letter was sent out. We had a great discussion. Please memorialize, please respond, and I received none. So that was September 28th. Please respond to that. They refused to do that. On October 1st, I started reading press reports both in the Politico and also in the National Review, and said specifically, after I asked OPM, have you ever dealt specifically with leadership in either house on these proposed rules, and they told me no 3 times, we find out in Politico that leadership worked for months to save these very same long-standing subsidies according to documents and emails provided to Politico. So I go back to the original question, and my concern. If you talk to an agency, do you have a right, whether you're in the majority or the minority, to talk to OPM? Do you have a right to receive an answer? And frankly, when you get that answer, should that answer be truthful? And 3 times they told me no, that they had not dealt with leadership. And you can see in the press reports of the emails that were released that that wasn't the case. So what was reported in these stories is directly counter to what OPM told me in our meeting. I followed up with another letter dated October 8th. I asked for OPM to provide me with detailed lists of all conversations or negotiations that they had with leadership staff. So this is what I said specifically. In light of recent press reports, the congressional leadership staff negotiated with the Office of Personnel and Management, OPM, regarding changes made to the Federal Employees Health Benefit Program. I specifically reiterate my request that you provide me with a detailed list of all conversations or negotiations with any staff member of the Senate or House leadership. These news reports run directly counter to statements that you made with me and 3 others from OPM staff members during our meeting 2 weeks ago. This time I got a response. I finally get a response. OPM told me, you have a copy of that? OPM told me they couldn't answer my question. They told me they couldn't answer the questions because the government was shut down. Pretty convenient and, frankly, very disturbing. All I am asking is whether OPM told me in our meetings is true or whether the press is reporting the truth. Who is saying, where is the truth in this? Senators have a right to ask questions, they have a right to receive answers, and those answers should be truthful. That's why I put that hold on there, Mr. President. That's why I said, that's why I voted against cloture against this nominee. This is why I will vote against the nominee, not because I have an issue with the nominee herself. I have a problem with this agency. I want to reiterate and again express my appreciation with others in this chamber that are as frustrated as I am with OPM, Senator Vitter being one of them, of not being able to get answers, to receive answers back from this particular agency. And I want to say that I still believe, and I think most in this chamber believe this, that what's important and good for the American people should be good for Congress. What's good for Congress should be good for the American people. And I stand by that. And we'll be voting against final passage on this nominee. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.